What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Endurance Insights, where I cover different endurance topics each and every single week from your questions or just from what I see from my athletes or myself struggling with along this endurance journey to hopefully give you some tips to optimize your training and performance. All right, our three topics on the docket for today are first, what are the best investments you should be making from an aero optimization perspective on the bike? Second one is going to be some carb loading tips for triathlon and marathon events to make sure that you're not hitting the dreaded wall during these events and that you can have good energy to finish your event strong and maximize your full potential on the day. And final topic is going to be warm up protocols for a triathlon event to make sure that you are ready to go and not going to have panic attacks in the swim. All right, let's talk about best ROI for your aero optimization on the bike. Aerodynamics is something that not enough athletes are thinking about. And if you want to get the best bang for your buck in terms of the power that you're putting out. I know everybody's obsessed with power these days, but I've had many instances in races where guys can push who might be the same size as me who push 20, 30, 40 watts more than me, but if I'm more aerodynamic and then I also had to expend less energy to do so and we get off the bike and have to run after it, then the more aero you are, the better. So there's definitely some dollar investments you can make in this stuff. There's some cheap ones and some more expensive ones. So I'm hopefully going to give you some tips here to start to make your hierarchy of what you should be looking at first. So, number one on the list is always going to be getting a bike fit and optimizing your bike position. So, if you've never ridden a TT bike before, or even if you have, like making sure you get a professional bike fit from a knowledgeable fitter and make sure you ask around to people who have had good experiences and you're not just picking the first person you see. Make sure you get someone with experience for the type of racing that you're doing. So if you're going to be doing Ironman triathlons, knowing that you have somebody with experience who's worked with lots of Ironman people and knows that what the changes need to be made to be able to balance both comfort and performance on the day. So with a bike fit, the more you can stay in that aero position for longer and as well as push better power while doing so is going to be your fastest way to ride the fastest time. So all of this other stuff doesn't matter if you're that I'm going to talk about after these optimizations if you don't spend the time to be able to lock in that position and be comfortable in that, because then you're just going to be riding on your hoods. And then at that point, you're just going to be giving away so much time because you're going to be a sail out there. So fit and position is number one always. I even go once a year to get my fit double checked by my bike fitter, just in case I've had any changes in either the racing I'm doing or maybe in my mobility or my strength or things like that. I can make sure that I'm dialed in. Usually I do it at the start of winter before I'm going into a bigger training block and starting to spend some more time on the TT bike. I get it done then versus trying to make changes like right before a race can be very dangerous, especially if you've trained in another position. So give yourself loads of time to train in these positions. Number two is going to be clothing. So having a good, well-fitting aerodynamic suit. So there's lots of great brands out there, and you want to usually pick ones if you're truly worried about speed and comfort. Pick ones that have been tested in the wind tunnel and that you probably see a lot of professionals wearing, meaning that they're going to be the fastest and most comfortable kits for a long distance event. So if you look at a T100, a 70.3, or an Ironman Pro Field and see the different brands they're using, maybe comb through some of those websites, see what's the best deals in your area and the best designs. Or if your club has different clothing, you could purchase through that as well if it's a reputable brand as well. Our club uses Castelli and it's the most comfortable stuff I've ever used, and it is super aerodynamic as well. So definitely get a well-fitting tri-suit. You're going to have less chafing. It's going to be much faster. It can be 5 to 20 watts faster than if you have a baggy suit that you're wearing for the race. And then some little optimizations. It's not faster for everyone per se, but wearing Aero socks or calf sleeves on the bike can be a little bit faster. The wind hitting your skin versus these materials that can be a little bit more aerodynamic for those, but they're kind of nice to haves at the end if you have the right fit and position and suit. You're like 90% of the way there. Another great investment for the dollar per watt is going to be an Aero helmet. So this is, if you think about it, the first thing, other than maybe your hands, the first thing that the wind is hitting, and our heads are such huge sails. So to get good aerodynamic flow across these helmets is super important, versus a regular road helmet that usually has lots of like holes in it. Great for ventilation and great in like a really hot race like Lanzarote or Kona and stuff like that, where the trade-off of being cooler is more important than aero. You might consider a road helmet, but anytime it's under probably like 25, 30 degrees Celsius, you want to be using an actual aero helmet that doesn't have like a bunch of holes and stuff in it. So some great ones that are testing really fast are that new Rudy Project helmet. I think it's a Wing Dream. I've used the Giro Arrowhead for many years. It's one that's super fast for a lot of people, and no matter what your position, it usually tests pretty fast. And then there's obviously some ones from some other reputable brands as well. But an Aero helmet can make, yeah, another 5-15 watts different over just your road helmet. So I notice a big difference. Like you can just find positions when you're in that Aero position with the Aero helmet where you can just kind of tuck your head and play around, and there's a spot where you go, and then the wind just like you stop hearing it, so you can tell that it's definitely a super Aero thing versus the road helmet. So just one to invest in there too. Another big one is tires and tubes setup. So I see so many people rock up to races with these old training tires or these gator skins that they're all worried about getting a flat with. So they're using these old tires and pump them up way too hard. So tires and tubes is something that has come a long way in technology in the last number of years. The tires are a lot more puncture resistant these days, especially if you're doing like a tubeless setup, for example. You can run more like a 60, 70, 80 psi depending on the tire. And with the sealant in there, even if you get a small little like puncture in there, it'll seal itself. But they're these days we're running, a lot of people are running 25, 28 millimeter tires, and these are super fast, and just like, especially that you can run the lower pressures, like you just get less of the bumps, where back in the day when they were running 21, 23 mil tires at 100, 120 psi, your tires just bouncing like this, and it's not as fast as if it's just rolling nicely over any sort of crack in the road. So I like to usually change my tires at about a week or two before the race, just so I can get a few rides to make sure if I'm riding tubeless that the sealant is all good to go, the tire's ready to go. And then also, if you're, say, running tubes and stuff like that, you've had everything set. The amount of people I've seen change their tires and tubes like the day before the race can be a very dicey one if you end up messing it up or popping a tube, and now suddenly you're building yourself extra stress before the race. So get some new tires and tubes. If you are running tubes, latex tubes are going to be a little bit faster than a regular like butyl tube. But yeah, there's also the TPU tubes in there these days. I usually use that more in my flat kit because they pack up nicely and are super light. But usually the fastest ones is to go with like a Continental GP 5000 with some sort of latex tube, and you'll be probably most of the way there. Or tubeless with like a Conti GP 5000 tubeless ready tire. Next one that is you've seen probably on a lot of the pros recently is hydration setup. So this is a super important one. One of the biggest things is trying not to have bottles in the like triangle part of your frame. So the common ones when we had road bikes or triathlon bikes, you have those two bottle mounts that are right in the frame area, like under between your legs there. Those are super slow spots. It's just the wind comes and hits the frame and then hits those bottles and just causes extra air disruption there. So you'll notice pretty much no pros will ever have one there unless it's an Aero bottle that is in line with the actual frame. There's way more aerodynamic ways to set up your hydration. So one of the fastest ones is the between the arms bottle. So whether having it there or some people have it a little higher and back that's closer to the chest. But what it does is it takes out some of the hole of the that is disrupted by like your body, and allows that to hit the bottle and kind of go wide from you versus just coming in and hitting your chest. So it's a nice, cool way to get some optimizations with the between the arms bottle. And then just the other spots to put bottles is usually behind the seat. You'll notice some people will tilt them back so that even when the wind comes over your back, it's not hitting like a straight up bottle. But you need to find like what's going to be the best. If you have a really strong bottle cage back there, maybe you can put it on an angle and not worry about losing bottles. But for most people, it's going to be straight or maybe a little bit tilted where you can still get aerodynamic gains. It's not in the frame area, but still get some gains off of having your hydration on the back there. Another one people love to jump to because they think it's going to be a great investment in terms of getting faster is like Aero wheels or a disc wheel. In terms of dollar per watt stuff, like this is one of the worst ones you can do. If you take care of a lot of those other stuff on the upper end of things that I've talked about, the first five are going to be way better investment first. And if you've taken care of all of those and have extra income, great, buy the deeper section wheels, especially a deep rear wheel. Like a 70, 80 mil or a disc is super fast. Just be careful depending on what kind of conditions you're riding in. The front wheel, not getting too deep of one, especially if you're in windy conditions. For most people, I like them to run more like a 60 mil is a pretty safe spot in most conditions, unless they're a really good rider and know that they're maybe riding in a location that is going to be a little nicer on the wind. They could maybe do like an 80 mil on the front, but for most people, 40, 60 is still going to be Aero, but focus on the rear wheel being the deep one. I've even noticed like in super windy stuff, the disc isn't what scares me. You can actually kind of use it advantageously in a sail in terms of like if the wind's coming off your right, like letting it push you a bit, then slowly coming back into the wind and letting it push you, versus the front wheel that has the wobble that can get going is a lot scarier. So think about more your front wheel in terms of if you're looking at aggressive depth to be careful with that one. A cool one you can do if you have just deep section wheels already to get a little boost is like Easy Gains has those like disc wheel covers for I think like $200. But again, it's going to be like 5-8 watts savings probably to have a disc wheel versus like an 80 mil wheel. So might not be worth the investment if you can put that money in other places like some brand new tires and tubes are probably going to go faster than that wheel cover. Next one people can look at is like new aero bars or extensions. So for the most part, this is like not going to be a great watt per dollar savings, unless you maybe need more reach to help set up your position. For the most part, like you can buy these like very fancy $1,000, $1,500 cockpits. Some of the better deals these days are like buying some of the more carbon extension bars, or even like Fast TT has some great options there for I think they're still up there in the 750 to $1,000. So like maybe just get some new poles and take care of the other things before you invest in new aero bars and extensions. They're very much a nice to have and are really not going to save you much speed, unless again more reach and more comfort. Then that might make sense if it's allowing you to stay in aero for longer and be faster. And then the final one on the list that people love to go right to right away that thinks going to be their answer is a brand new bike or bike frame. So I think for most people, once you have something around like probably a $3,000 bike that has like components that are like, for example, in Shimano, like 105 or better. So 105, Ultegra or Dura Ace, like a frame upgrade really isn't going to get you that much extra speed at that point. It's not going to make you that much faster. Like there's very slight things you'll notice of like this, the frames being stiffer and some of the components being a little bit smoother, but somebody on like a 3K versus a 10K bike, and if the person on the 3K bike, say they push the same power, but the person on the 3K bike is suddenly in a way better position, spends more time in aero, has the better tri suit, an aero helmet, good tires and tubes, and a good hydration setup, they're probably going to put loads of time into the person with the more expensive bike. So the amount of value I've got in my past years of when I was riding a $4,000 bike, riding by guys with $15,000 bikes was very satisfying, because in the end, it's the engine and how you use it from the fit and everything like that that matters more than the actual bike itself. So that should be your last one. Get yourself to a certain point, and then that's very much just a nice to have. All right, that was a little in depth on that topic, but I think those are some huge aerodynamic spots. You could have saved like from that stuff close to 30 to 50 watts of savings. So that means like if you say we're doing 200 watts and now you did 170 watts for the same speed, like you could have saved all of that from just little tips, assuming some of that stuff was on the lower end when you initially started. All right, next one I want to talk about is carb loading. So the best practices for both triathlons and marathoning. So goal of carb loading, we want to maximize our glycogen stores to um, in the muscles and the liver to essentially delay fatigue and stop us from hitting the wall or falling off in terms of energy in a race. It's especially valuable for like 90 plus minutes events. So if you think of half marathon, marathon, Olympic distance, 70.3 Ironman. These are all spots where I am getting athletes to carb load in a certain size, depending on how long the event is. So most times I'll get athletes to do this carb loading shift about 2 to 3 days before the race. Definitely the day before and the day before that are probably the two most important days. But for an Ironman, they can start to be shifting it up to 3 days before. So when we combine with this with the taper and the reduced training volume, it's a nice way to let the glycogen accumulate in the muscles and liver because we're not burning through it with the lower training volume. So, what should you be targeting during this time? So, usually the recommendations in terms of some daily carb intake for these carb loads is something like 8 to 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So, I'll use myself as an example. I'm about 70 kilos. So, that would be somewhere in the 500 to 800 grams of carbs per day. So, if I was doing an Ironman, I might do if my Ironman was on the Sunday, I might start on the Thursday, getting more to like 400 or 500 grams, and then probably the 1 to 2 days before the race, I'd probably be targeting closer to 600 to 700 for those days. And usually I want to make it a little heavier in terms of like my morning in terms of carbs and trying to get ahead of things. So I'm not eating huge meals right before bed and disrupting my sleep, especially the day before the race. So between meals and snacks, you should be able to just have mostly regular size meals. You'll be eating a little more frequently. And we'll talk about some of the items, but they're pretty like calorie dense. But one of the big things you want to make sure you're doing is keeping protein and fat more moderate or on the low end and avoid overdoing fiber. So, not eating, cranking a bunch of salads. This just helps to reduce GI distress. So, some of the best low fiber, low fat, familiar foods to be able to use during this carb loads is things like white rice, pasta, bread, potatoes, bagels, oats, and pancakes are an awesome one. Low fiber cereals are another good one. And then things like bananas and juice and applesauce and dried fruit. And then even things as simple as like adding sports drinks or gels or gummies, adding some candy, things like that are all great things to do there. And then some simple desserts that aren't high in fat, like some lower fat sort of cookies or ice cream and stuff like that can be some great options there. Just remember when we're doing these carb loads to always still make sure you're staying on your fluids and electrolytes. So just making sure like when you're drinking water in those couple days before during the carb load to always be adding like whether it's a couple 100 milligrams of sodium, just so you're not like flushing out all of the sodium in your system. We want to bring fluids and sodium in together to alongside these carbs to allow us to be ready come race day. And then so for an example, like carb load day, like I would look at something where I'm doing like 600 grams of carbs. I might start with like a bagel, sports drink, and a banana or something in the morning. And then I might do a snack that has like another piece of bread, banana, and a granola bar. Then at lunch, I might have something like 1 to 2 cups of rice with like some chicken so that I'm not just like eating pure carbs, and nice to have some protein to feel a little bit more full. Maybe some soy sauce in there to get some sodium. Might do pretzels, applesauce, and another cup of juice in there. And then for dinner, I might do pasta with like a simple tomato sauce, not like a Alfredo or anything like that. That could be very fatty. With maybe some garlic bread on the side. And then an evening snack, I might have like 1 or 2 rice cakes with some honey on it. And that would be a way I could get like 600 grams in. And then to put our cap on the carb load, we definitely want to do a final top off race morning. So for most people, they're aiming for at least and like more almost for the bigger the event. So usually 2 to 3 hours pre-race. Athletes are getting anything from 100 to 200 grams of carbs. So it could be things that you've practiced in training. So whether you have your oatmeal with banana and maple syrup that allows you to get a bunch of carbs in with some sports drink and keep it super simple. I've used like muffins in the past. They're really calorie dense. Uh, so those are the main ways you can really focus on carb load, and that will make a massive difference for these 90+ minute events. But again, scale it up, more and more carbs needed for the longer events. All right, so our last topic for today is, first of all, should I be warming up before my triathlon, and what are some best practices to do so? So warming up before triathlon can really set the tone for your race. So we want to raise up our core temp, sort of prime the aerobic system, and also activate some of those neuromuscular patterns so that we're ready to go on race day. But the big key is we don't want to build any extra fatigue or burn any matches before the race. We're just trying to prime the system and not raise up any extra fatigue or get ourselves dehydrated or anything like that. So I've talked about warm-ups in the past, but usually the shorter the event, the longer warm-up we want to do, because you need to go in at a very high capacity right away. So if let's use a sprint triathlon, I might do a longer warm up of something like 30 minutes where I do maybe a 15, 20-minute run and then a 10-minute swim before, or versus an Ironman where I might get in the water for only 5 or 10 minutes because it's such a long day. I don't want to risk building any fatigue. Also, I have so much time to build into the race and warm up while I'm moving along in the initial part of the swim that I don't need to be on as much right away versus a shorter event. So usually our warm ups are going to be something in like the 10 minutes up to 30-minute duration, but definitely keep them shorter, especially if it's hot out. And again, that's going to build extra fatigue or raise the core temp too much. Or start getting you dehydrated. And then maybe you need a bit of a longer warm up if it's cooler out. Like if you're racing in the triathlon and it's 5 or 10 degrees that morning, maybe you're going to throw on some sweatpants and a hoodie and get the system warmed up versus just going into the race cold, and then you'll have a panic attack right when you go in the swim. So usually I like to finish this warm up 10 or 15 minutes before the race actually starts so that you're not like fully cooling down, but you have time to sort of get the heart rate down and get ready for the race. And then most of it's going to be easy, but a few little race pace efforts in there will usually get things going. So I think one of the best ones you can do is a swim warm up. So usually I'm doing like 5 to 7 minutes, easy, continuous swim, smooth strokes, relaxed breathing. And then I might do maybe like 3 or 4 sort of 20 to 30-second build efforts where I'll sort of pick it up to race pace and then do a full recovery of either just hang out in the water for 30 seconds before I do another one, or an easy swim for a minute or two between that. Maybe practice sighting a little bit so I know what I'm dealing with in terms of what are the conditions I'm going to be dealing with at the start of the swim. And then if a swim warm up isn't allowed, you could do something simple like a run warm up on the land, or do some band pull aparts or arm swings, or like a short jog with some strides. But getting some sort of warm up in is super important, especially because there is some races where you can't get in the water before. A lot of the Ironman events these days are just like limited in the area you have to warm up, especially if it's like a downriver swim and things like that. So if you could do some dry land warm up, that goes a long way to getting you rolling. And then just remember, if it is a cold swim and you can't get in the water before, like bringing a cold bottle of water and just like doing a quick splash like 5 minutes before on your neck and face so that your body is sort of primed to what they could face as it jumps in the water, especially if it's going to be cooler conditions there. So that's a great way to sort of take the edge off. And then you've sort of taken that initial like shock out of your body so that when you get in the water, you're able to just get into your rhythm and keep your breathing in check versus having a panic attack right away. So just one final tip in there as well. But please do not skip the warm up. That is the primer for the day. Even if it's an Ironman, good 5 or 7 minutes, just get the body moving and then you can get in your rhythm right away. All right. Thanks for joining me. Those are our 3 topics for today. We will see you again next week. feel free to toss me a like and subscribe below. That definitely helps get this out to more people. I'm not trying to make money off of this, so I just want to put out the good word and hopefully educational info to help people out here. So your like and subscribe help me a bunch. And if you ever want questions answered, toss stuff in the comments below or send me a message on Instagram. I'm at Mark Cullen with an extra N on the end. Have a good one, and we will see you next week.